Right, insulating the walls now of the office. Same principle as the ceiling. Take the non-adhesive, non-solvent grab adhesive, PVA type style. Put the glue down the sides. As before, it hasn't got to stick on permanently because the plasterboard is going to be on top anyway. Taking it right down behind the skirting board, along the top, down the sides, like so. And the same principle as the flooring and the ceiling is the insulation. This stuff will then go on top of the bubble wrap insulation and then the plasterboard. So I've got this tin foil side. Oh, actually this one's both tin foil, that's quite good. This one's both sides tin foil, so that's even double insulation. I've changed to the better quality one for the walls, just to give it a bit more insulation on the back, but it's quite cold. Taking it right up to the top and just pressing it down right underneath the skirting board. Right in there, right to the sides. The problem is it's so cold at the moment, the glue is having a bit of problem sticking. It's like -3 outside, which for England is quite cold really. But it is working, it's okay. Put it in place, and there you are. As before, the insulation will then go on the top, like so, and then the plasterboard underneath. I'll do that in a minute. Right, how to insulate your wall. Now then, I've got some of my sheep's wool and recycled plastic bottles. Now, what I found quite difficult is when you're on your own and you're insulating the wall and you put the insulation on and then put the plasterboard on. It's very hard to get it into position to put the plasterboard on. You don't want insulation on these rafters here because it pushes the plasterboard out too far. So what I'm doing is I'm just lightly taping them with some ordinary masking tape or whatever you've got handy. Just taping it in, tucking it into behind the mini skirting board. Now I am putting a skirting board on there because A, it stops you if you're kicking with your feet, it stops the plasterboard breaking down, but it also makes it look neater as well. It makes it look neater and it stops dust from coming out from underneath the plasterboard. So tuck it in there, put it on the sides, grab yourself some tape, just rip it off, just very lightly tape it into position like so. It hasn't got to look pretty because no one's going to see it. It's only going in position so you can put the plasterboard on top of it. Right, I've got the plasterboard ready to go on top of the wool insulation. I've cut around the key area. You can see up there, the key area, just around this area up here. It's the fiddly bits now, really. Doing on the doors and the windows. You're cutting and screwing different bits of plasterboard around those areas. It's a bit like a puzzle, but I recommend really going for the larger pieces, to as much large plaster work as possible, and then do the fiddly bits at the top, the smaller areas, so that you're not wasting too much plasterboard. So I'm going to fit the bit of plasterboard over the insulation I've just shown you. I've got my drill and my screws ready. I lift the plasterboard up into position. Luckily, plasterboard's quite pliable, so if you've got any little areas where you haven't quite cut it properly, you can just push it in, as long as it's not too tight. You don't want to ruin the plasterboard. Press it into position. Make sure you've got your battens are lined up. You know where they are, so you can then screw them into position. I tend to do the screw areas on the top first and push the plasterboard in towards the wood so you get some good purchase. Push it in and then drill. Hold it with your knee or somebody else to help you, and then screw along until you've got it nice and tight. Sometimes the insulation can push a little bit towards you, push the plasterboard away, but the best thing to do is sometimes if you've got quite thick insulation is to thin out the insulation, put it apart a bit. Depends on the depth of the battens really. Draw the lines down the battens. I tend to put maybe 4 or 5 in. Push in. You see, follow the line down. Drill in. If you over drill, they do tend to go into the plaster. You can always fill them in, fill the holes in later anyway. But you don't want to go in too far, otherwise you lose the purchase on your plasterboard.